Scrooge McDuck grew his wealth and packed his famous money bin to the brim. But it all started with just one coin. Today, I'm diving into the story of the number 1 dime. I'll show you my 19th century dime overlooked by the numismatic community, and then the rest of my Scrooge McDuck coin collection. I've even uncovered some duck-themed trading cards, and trust me, there are some wild finds. Let's get started. Over the years, many comic book artists have drawn Scrooge McDuck's number 1 dime, but it was only in Don Rosa's stories that the coin was given a realistic historical touch. The first clear depiction appears in The Last of the Clan McDuck, the opening story in the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck series. That's where we see the 1875 date on the dime. Fergus, Scrooge's papa, was handed a strange coin his daughters had found, after it was tossed by one Adam rich Amurican he hear so much about. So, on Scrooge's 10th birthday, he gifted his son a shoeshine kit. Fergus wanted it to be a tough job that would teach his boy a lesson about hard work and not being trusting. Next, Bert, the ditch digger, was tasked with paying using the Amurican coin as Scrooge's first customer. Being poor folk, Fergus hoped that the first coin would inspire his son to greatness. Little Scrooge spent half an hour cleaning the powerful dirty boots and then collapsed. But he got his money, except it was Amurican money. It taught him that life is filled with tough jobs, and there would always be Sharpies to cheat him. Right then and there, he made himself a promise to be tougher than the toughies, and sharper than the Sharpies, and to always make his money square. The Amurican coin inspired him to leave Glasgow and try to make something of himself in the land of opportunity. The silver 1875 seated Liberty dimes come in 5 mint mark variants. There is the no mint mark variant struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Then there are the CC mint mark variants from the Carson City Mint that come with the mint mark positioned either above or below the bow in the wreath. Closing out the list, there's the S mint mark from the San Francisco Mint, which also appears in both above and below the bow positions. The dimes we'll want to focus on are the ones with the S mint mark. It's estimated that the above-the-bow S dimes are about 4 times rarer than the below-the-bow ones. The reason for 1875 having an above-the-bow S variant all of a sudden is unknown, and that variant never appeared again throughout the rest of the series, which ended in 1891. But before we dive deeper into numismatic intricacies, let's look at the history of the number 1 dime. We see the number 1 dime in many adventures, initially with a thread around it to help Scrooge keep it close and not lose it, and later resting on a cushion under a dome in his money bin. Memorable practical uses of the coin included Scrooge using it to unscrew bolts, to show off and let himself be recognized, or as a reminder of the promise he made to himself the day he earned his number 1 dime. Magica the Spell, who was always after the number 1 dime, tells us she used the mint mark date and nick combination to identify the coin. It's hard to tell what sort of nick she spoke about, as I couldn't spot it illustrated anywhere. The first comic panel in The Last of the Clan McDuck story shows the back of the coin with a below-the-bow S mint mark. Given the presence of the important family heirloom watch next to it, and the story's plot, this serves as about as close a confirmation of the number 1 dime's mint mark as you can get without the narrator explicitly spelling it out. But in 2021, a deluxe edition of the complete life and times of Scrooge McDuck was released. Its slipcase contains a collectible toy coin with the coin's reverse side factory placed facing front. And the coin, which I might still mistakenly consider part of the slipcase artwork, has the S mint mark above the bow. The thing is, although the reverse looks very realistic, the front was changed to feature a duck lady. On the other hand, The back of the deluxe edition book features printed images of coins with a realistic appearance. They also have the S mint mark above the bow, but unlike the toy coin, there is no Duck Lady on the obverse and no Disney logo on the reverse. So all in all, since the comic panel predates the slipcase and is part of a very well thought out story, I think the below-the-bow variant is probably the one Scrooge McDuck fans would want to opt for. Coincidentally, my dime happens to be above the bow variant, as at the time I knew about the slipcase but completely missed the clear as day mint mark in the comic panel. But since it's actually the first dime I ever held, making it my own number one dime, I don't feel the need to replace it. And the whole mix-up sort of reminds me of how Scrooge got his first dime, as there was more to it than met the eye and a lesson in it too. The coin Scrooge received was circulated, and since Magica mentioned there being a nick, aiming for a very high grade probably defeats the purpose for fans. Now, where grading might help is in spotting cleaned coins, because graders often catch that. Coin collectors generally frown on coin cleaning since it removes the original surface and very often negatively impacts the value. More importantly, people don't typically clean the everyday coins they used to pay with. So it's pretty unlikely that Scrooge's number one dime was cleaned back in 1877 when he got it. So if I were buying my number one dime again, I'd probably go for a cheap, low-graded S below-the-bow copy with decent eye appeal, no dark toning, no cleaned, damaged or error annotations. And then possibly I'd crack the coin out if I felt like wrapping it with a thread, like in the young Scrooge stories. I think the numismatic community hasn't caught up with the relevance of the 1875 S-City Liberty dimes. The February 10, 2020 weekly edition of Coin World ran an article specifically about these dimes, but failed to mention Scrooge McDuck at all. I also haven't seen eBay listings for the 1875 dimes mention Scrooge either. Moreover, many US sellers who list these coins don't offer shipping to Europe, probably because they don't realize the Duck Comics connection and the fact that Europe is where the largest portion of the fan base is. To be frank, the only place I've seen any chatter about these coins is the main Don Rosa Facebook group. One thing to note, from what I've seen, graded copies with good eye appeal tend to come up for sale at reasonable prices irregularly. If I were looking again, I'd be patient, set up saved searches, and be prepared to give it more than a year. Also, these coins sometimes get auctioned outside of eBay, as coin collectors apparently have other marketplaces they like as well. Moving on to my other Scrooge coins, the statue is a hand-poured silver piece weighing around 1.1 troy ounces. I like the size as it's comparable to 1 ounce coins and displays nicely alongside them. There is a wide variety of similar statues out there depicting all kinds of subjects, but they aren't legal tender. The selection of silver statues that are fully licensed is very narrow, and those tend to be quite heavy and therefore pricey. The Prospector Scrooge bar is just a silver bar, or so I hope, with a printed design on it, so nothing particularly special. I got it off eBay. The premium over spot price I've seen these go for there is usually high enough to make it worth the effort for the people producing them. The New Zealand Mint released this licensed 1 ounce 999 silver coin in 2022 to mark the 75th anniversary. It was in November 1947 that Karl Barks created Scrooge's debut comic story, Christmas on Bear Mountain. This is a proof coin and it comes with the usual limited mintage and presentation box gimmicks. As nice as it is, I wish they had given us a full background like on that simple silver bar I showed earlier. I flipped through the comic books one more time and as far as I can tell spotted an 1880 Morgan silver dollar that Scrooge received from his uncle in America in his first story there. Just like with his number one dime, Scrooge chose to keep the dollar as a memento. We don't get to see the back of the dollar in the story though. That dollar might be of particular importance to collectors, as it marks the moment when Scrooge first conceived the idea of his money bin. It's also possible he later used that very dollar to help buy the Dilly Dollar boat from his uncle Pothole. The comic notes that it cost him nearly every cent he had earned on the river. There are Philly, Carson City, New Orleans, and San Francisco variants. Uncle Pothole lived in Louisville, Kentucky. Since New Orleans was directly linked to Louisville by river trade routes, the New Orleans Mint seems the most likely source of that dollar. Pothole later retired to New Orleans as well, which might suggest he already had personal ties to the city in 1880. Luck permitting, I would like to add the 1880 New Orleans Morgan silver dollar to my collection someday. Surprisingly, coverage of Scrooge McDuck in collectible trading card products is minimal, especially when it comes to well-thought-out cards. There were some really high sales of his cards from recent releases, which I don't begin to understand. I don't get the appeal of these cards, since they tend to be just pictures of him set against weird backgrounds he would never be seen in. Rather than the new shiny stuff, the old 4 Gladstone card releases stand out as the most true to the comic book stories. From what I've gathered, these were distributed as part of comic book album purchases. In 2024, Panini released their Disney Anthology trading card set in Europe. In my view, it largely flew under the radar. The nicely designed 110 card base set features original artwork created for this project. The artists were asked to reinterpret some of the famous short films by Disney Animation. Excluding cards from China, this could very well be the first time since the 2003 to 2004 Disney Treasures trading card sets that we've seen fully licensed Duck sketch cards. If I'm reading the official guide correctly, there are only 150 sketch cards in the entire product. Considering the total print run, that makes these sketches extremely rare. In 2020, Upper Deck released Disney's Mickey Mouse trading cards featuring film cell and comic cut inserts. Since the film cells are all manufactured, I'm not particularly interested in those. That leaves the cuts from vintage Mickey Mouse comics. Both comic cover and interior panel cuts were made. Every publicly photographed comic cover cut includes at least one character's head in the frame. Upper Deck used multiple copies of certain comic book issues, so there may be multiple cards featuring the same comic panel cut. Granted, each panel will have slightly different framing since the cutting was done manually. The reason I'm bringing up the Mickey Mouse trading card set in a video about Scrooge McDuck is because of comic issues number 139 and 140. These included short stories featuring Donald and Daisy at the back of each issue. So out of 49 issues from which cuts were made, these two are the only ones with interior Duck comic panel cuts, making them especially interesting to Duck collectors. The text balloons are often cut out, as it seems the focus was on centering the characters. Unfortunately, this means comic cuts of the Ducks with cool text balloons might be the rarest thing out of the entire release. Mickey Mouse issue 28 was published in 1952 by Dell, and it could very well be the earliest comic book to receive the comic cut trading card treatment. The age of the paper might be why the Mickey Mouse cuts are covered with a protective plastic film, which isn't something we typically see with comic cut trading cards. For comparison, the earliest Marvel issue I know of used for a comic cut card is Amazing Fantasy number 15 from 1962, which contains the first appearance of Spider-Man. For me, the appeal of comic cards comes from several factors. There's the mystery of not fully knowing what's out there, which keeps these trading card sets interesting even years after their release. Then there's the journey of trying to find a card that sparks a memory or carries an interesting thought or a bit of humor. Comic cards add variety and a human touch to the broader collecting experience, and they reward those who do their research. Finally, I wanted to mention a product that is a crossover between trading cards and coins. The New Zealand Mint came up with the concept of trading coins. Scrooge, Donald, Daisy, and the nephews each had one design released on 1-ounce coins numbered to 20. The coins are packed in a plastic box with an inner colored insert wrapping the coin, giving the final product a look, feel, and dimensions resembling those of a regular trading card. The limited mintage of 20 rather than the more common 250 has made these coins quite pricey. But since both Star Wars and DC already received 2 trading coin releases, who's to say there won't be more duck trading coins in the future? Hey, actually, one last thing. Tron Legacy fans have their legendary Daft Punk score, and as Scrooge fans, we've got our own The Life and Times of Scrooge music album of the same caliber. If you're a Scrooge fan who didn't know about that album, well, you just found something special. Cheers!